Hello, everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Story 1. The order that shouldn't have been delivered. I was 31 and finishing up my last semester of online classes when I started doing gig deliveries at night. Not because I loved it, because winter bills don't care what you love. It was early in the season, the kind of cold where the air feels sharp and the snow hasn't fully settled yet, so every driveway looks the same shade of black and white, and every neighborhood feels a little quieter than it should. During winter break, I found myself going out for runs just to stay busy. I'd do a few orders after dinner, tell myself I'd go home after one more, and then keep going anyway because the streets were empty and the money added up faster at night. That was how I ended up taking the order I still think about. It was around 9 p.m. when I accepted it. 2 full bags of food from a family restaurant, plus a sealed drink carrier that I had to hold with both hands. The tip looked decent. The distance wasn't bad. The app showed a normal-looking residential area. I picked everything up, loaded it into the passenger seat, and followed the GPS. At first, it was exactly what you'd expect. Plowed main roads, then side streets with snow piled into lumpy walls along the curb, warm yellow porch lights, a few cars passing, windows glowing with televisions, nothing strange. Then the road turned into a winding road that kept climbing deeper into the back of the neighborhood, where the houses got farther apart and the streetlights thinned out. The app didn't say private road, but it started to feel like one. The road narrowed, trees crowded in closer. My headlights caught snowflakes drifting sideways in the beams, and there was that quiet you only get when you're away from traffic. No hum, no distant engines, just the soft hiss of tires over packed snow. The GPS kept insisting I was almost there. The street looked like it ended in a dead turnaround, except the blue line on my map pointed straight ahead, right into the darkness. I slowed, thinking the app was glitching, and then my headlights lit up a wooden gate. Not an iron gate, not something fancy, just rough boards with a simple cross brace, like something you'd see at the edge of a property line. A small reflective sign was bolted to it with the house number painted in black. It matched the address exactly. What threw me wasn't just the gate, it was the fact that none of the other houses had anything like it. Everything else in the neighborhood had open driveways and mailboxes right on the street. This one was sealed off like somebody didn't want casual visitors turning in. I pulled over and sat there for a second, watching my breath fog the windshield. I told myself it was probably an older property, maybe the last house built before the development expanded. Maybe they had kids or dogs and didn't want them running out. Still, my hand didn't go for the door right away. I checked the app again, confirmed the address, confirmed the name, confirmed it was marked as handed to me, not leave at door. That detail mattered more than it should, because a hand-it-to-me order meant someone was expecting me to walk up and meet them. I put my phone in my lap, got out, and walked up to the gate. No lock, no chain, just a latch that lifted with a dry wooden scrape that sounded too loud in the cold. The gate swang open easily, and I stepped back, feeling my shoulders tense for no good reason. I drove through. The driveway was wide gravel under a thin crust of snow, and it pushed between trees that formed a tunnel. The neighborhood behind me disappeared almost immediately, swallowed by the dark. My headlights bounced off bare trunks and low branches. Then the driveway curved once and opened to a small clearing where a single house sat at the end. It looked older, not abandoned, not collapsing, but older in a way that didn't fit the neighborhood. Wooden siding, a low roofline, a porch that sagged slightly in the middle. One of the front windows had blinds crooked at an angle, like someone had pulled them down too fast and never bothered fixing them. The app said I had arrived. I parked near the porch, left my engine running, and kept my headlights aimed straight at the front of the house, because without them, it would have been almost completely dark. There were no lights on inside. Not a lamp, not a TV glow, not a single window lit up. And the strangest part was the front door was open, just cracked wide enough to show a slice of blackness inside, the kind of black that doesn't look like a room, just a gap where light should be. I sat there, hands still on the steering wheel, watching that open door like it might move. I told myself it was normal. Maybe they were carrying something and left it open. Maybe the porch light was burned out. Maybe they were in the back of the house. I grabbed the bags, stepped out, and the cold hit harder. It always does when you leave the warmth of the car. The air smelled clean and sharp, but there was something else too, like old wood and damp earth, the way it smells near a basement. The porch creaked under my boots as I climbed the steps. The open doorway didn't just look dark, it looked quiet, like the sound of my movement was being absorbed before it could go anywhere. I could hear the faint tick of my car engine behind me. I could hear the soft crunch of snow falling off a branch nearby. But from inside the house, nothing. I stepped onto the porch and leaned slightly toward the doorway, trying to see into the entrance. That was when a voice called out from somewhere above me. A man, casual, like he'd been waiting. "Hey, just bring it up here for me." I froze. The voice wasn't right next to me, but it wasn't distant either. It sounded like it came from the top of a staircase angled down into the foyer. I looked inside and saw the outline of stairs immediately on the right, rising into the darkness. No light at the top, no silhouette, just a deeper shade of black where the second floor would be. I should have put the food down right there and left. I know that now. But in the moment, my brain did what brains do when something feels off. It tried to normalize it. Maybe he's injured. Maybe he's sick. Maybe he doesn't want to come downstairs in the cold. I took a half step inside, just enough for the doorway to frame me. The air inside felt colder than it should have, like the house had been unheated for hours. "Right up here," the voice said again. "I'll grab it from you." It came from the same place, from that pocket of darkness at the top of the stairs. And the more I listened, the more I realized something else. I couldn't hear anything behind the voice. No TV, no footsteps, no movement. Just the voice, and then silence again. I lifted one bag instinctively, like I was about to climb. Then the part of my mind that had been pretending everything was normal finally caught up. I couldn't see him. I couldn't see anything, and yet he was telling me to walk into his dark house and come upstairs. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like nausea. I backed out immediately, not turning around, not taking my eyes off the stairwell until I was fully back on the porch. I set both bags down right next to the open doorway, close enough that he could reach them if he wanted, and I didn't say another word. I just walked backward down the porch steps and then turned and ran to my car like the cold itself was chasing me. I threw the bag's handles off my fingers, slammed my door shut, and locked it even though I was already inside. As I pulled out, my headlights swept across the front of the house. The door was still open, still black, still quiet, and I had the sharp, sick feeling that the moment I drove away, someone would step into that doorway and watch my taillights disappear. I didn't look back long enough to confirm it. I drove straight home. I didn't report it, didn't tell the app, didn't post about it. I convinced myself I'd imagined the tone, the silence, the wrongness of it. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up the address, not on the delivery app, on county property records, and what I found made my throat go dry. The home was listed as unoccupied, owned through a local authority after a long foreclosure process, a property tagged for future sale or demolition depending on inspection. In plain language, it wasn't supposed to have anyone inside it at all, which meant whatever voice called down to me from the top of that staircase was never part of a normal delivery, and I'm glad I'll never know what was waiting in that darkness if I'd taken one more step. I didn't deliver for a few nights after that, not because I made some big decision, not because I swore off late shifts, just every time I opened the app and saw the map light up with little pins, my brain kept flashing back to that dark staircase and the way his voice sounded like it had been there long before I ever arrived. Still, money has a way of pushing fear into the background. A week later, I was out again. The storms had thickened by then. Plows were falling behind. Side streets turned into soft trenches where tires dragged through slush, and every few blocks you'd see a car parked in a weird angle because someone tried to pull in and just gave up halfway. That night was slow. A couple small orders, a few leave-at-door deliveries where I didn't see anyone at all, and as the hours crawled past midnight, I started to relax in spite of myself. That's the dangerous part of those nights. The routine lulls you. The quiet makes you think nothing can happen because nothing has happened for the last 3 hours. Around 1:15 a.m., I got another order. Nothing special, fast food, 1 bag, 1 drink, short distance. The drop-off was in a part of town I recognized. Older homes, narrow driveways, a few streets that didn't have sidewalks. It was the kind of neighborhood where you can tell the houses were built before the city figured out how to space things evenly. The GPS led me down a street that hadn't been plowed well. Snow was packed into ridges, and my tires crunched slowly, careful not to slide. The address was near the end of the road. As I pulled closer, I saw something that made me slow down automatically. A car was parked halfway on the curb, hazard lights blinking. Its hood was up, and a figure stood near the front, hunched and still, like they'd been there a while. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Then, my headlights hit the person's face, and I realized it was a woman. She lifted a hand toward me, slow, not waving exactly, more like signaling. I stopped a few feet away, window up. She stepped toward my passenger side. She looked young, maybe late 20s, dark hair shoved into a beanie. Her cheeks were red from the cold, and her lips had that pale, dry look you get when you've been outside too long. She knocked lightly on the glass. I rolled the window down just enough to hear her. "Sorry," she said quickly, voice tight like she'd been trying to stay calm for a while. "I don't mean to bother you. My car, it just died. I tried to walk, but it's freezing. I live just like a mile down. Can you give me a ride?" Her breath came out in fast puffs. She hugged her arms close like she was trying not to shake. I glanced at the dead car behind her. No other vehicles on the street. No porch lights in immediate view. My first instinct was sympathy, because the cold was real, because her face looked genuinely uncomfortable, because winter nights turn small problems into actual danger. But sympathy isn't the same thing as trust. I asked, "Do you have someone you can call?" "My phone's dead," she said immediately. Too immediate, like she'd rehearsed it. And then she looked past me, down the street, just for a split second, not like she was scanning for help, more like she was checking something. I didn't like that. Still, I'd already rolled the window down. I'd already engaged. And there's another thing about people like me, people who do gig work late at night.
We get used to interacting with strangers in small, polite, controlled ways. We build routines where everything is normal because we need it to feel normal. So I asked where she lived. She pointed vaguely down the road. Just down there, then a turn into the neighborhood. It's not far. I hesitated. She must have seen it on my face. Her expression softened, like she was trying to look harmless. Please, I'm really cold. That's what tipped me. Not the words, the way she said it like it was the exact phrase that had worked on other people. I told myself, I'll take her, drop her quick, keep the doors locked until she's inside. It's fine, I'm not leaving her out here. So I unlocked the passenger side. She got in fast, almost too fast, like she'd been afraid I'd change my mind. The inside of my car immediately fogged from her breath. I could smell cold air on her jacket and something faintly sweet under it, like cheap perfume or body spray. "Thank you," she said over and over. "Thank you so much." I started driving. At first, everything stayed normal. She directed me down the street, then told me to turn into a neighborhood I'd never actually driven through, even though I passed the entrance on my commute sometimes. The turn was narrow and unplowed. My tires slipped slightly, but I corrected. As soon as we entered, the houses looked different, smaller, lower. Some looked like they'd been modified over time, patched with mismatched siding. A couple had porches stacked with random furniture like storage. It wasn't a bad place exactly, just tired, forgotten. The further we went in, the less I liked it. Snow got deeper, the road narrowed. My headlights didn't reach far because the street bent and bent again. I slowed almost to a crawl. "That's good," I said finally, keeping my voice casual. "You can hop out here. It's getting rough and I don't want to get stuck." I looked at her. Her face wasn't grateful anymore. It wasn't scared either. It was flat. Then, as soon as she noticed me watching, she forced a smile. Too late. "Just a little farther," she said. I didn't move. "I really can't. This road's not plowed." She leaned slightly toward me, like she was trying to make it feel personal. "It's literally right there. Please." Something in my gut tightened. I said no again. Her smile faded completely this time, and her eyes narrowed in a way that wasn't panicked, it was annoyed. "You're already here," she said sharper. "Just go." The tone change hit me like cold water. That wasn't the voice of someone desperate for help. That was the voice of someone irritated that the plan wasn't working. I felt my hands tighten on the steering wheel. I forced myself to stay calm. "No, this is as far as I'm going. You need to get out." She stared at me for a second, just stared. Then she exhaled through her nose like she was disappointed. Slowly, she opened the door. Cold air rushed in. She stepped out and shut it harder than necessary. I immediately started a three-point turn, tires grinding in the snow. And as my headlights swung across the right side of the street, they lit up something I hadn't seen before. Figures. Not one, multiple, standing farther back near the tree line between the last few houses in the woods. They were spaced out, half hidden like they'd been waiting, not moving, just watching the vehicle in the road. I couldn't make out faces, only silhouettes, but I saw enough to feel my blood go hot. One of them lifted an arm slightly, not waving, more like signaling her, and she started walking toward them without looking back at me. I finished the turn with my heart punching my ribs, threw the car into drive, and got out of there so fast my tires fishtailed.
In my rear-view mirror, I saw her shape disappear into the shadows where the others stood. I drove until I was back on the main road, then kept going another 10 minutes before I pulled into a lit gas station and sat there breathing hard like I'd just sprinted. I told myself 100 things. Maybe they were her friends. Maybe they were waiting to help. Maybe it was nothing. But my body didn't believe any of that. because I knew what it felt like. It felt like I'd been guided into a place where my car could have gotten stuck, where my phone might have stopped working, where nobody on the main road would have heard me. And the only reason I didn't find out what came next was because I said no at the right time. I never reported it. What would I even say? That a woman asked for help and I got a bad feeling? But for weeks after, every time I stopped at a red light late at night, I checked my mirrors like someone might walk up from nowhere. And every time I saw a stranded car on the shoulder in winter, I kept driving. Not because I didn't care, because I knew exactly how easy it is to be pulled into something you can't explain until it's too late. The worst part wasn't that night itself. It was how normal everything looked afterward. The next morning, I drove past that same street in daylight. Snowbanks had been pushed aside. Kids' toys were half buried in yards. A mail truck idled near the corner like nothing unusual had ever happened there. No sign of the stalled car, no sign of people near the trees, just a quiet neighborhood pretending to be ordinary. That's how those moments stick with you. There's no aftermath, no headline, no proof that lets your brain file it away as danger avoided. Just the feeling that you were inches away from stepping into something with no clean ending. I didn't talk about it with friends. When you try to explain something like that out loud, it immediately sounds dramatic, like you're projecting fear on. In my rear-view mirror, I saw her shape disappear into the shadows where the others stood. I drove until I was back on the main road, then kept going another 10 minutes before I pulled into a lit gas station and sat there breathing hard like I'd just sprinted. I told myself 100 things. Maybe they were her friends. Maybe they were waiting to help. Maybe it was nothing. But my body didn't believe any of that, because I knew what it felt like. It felt like I'd been guided into a place where my car could have gotten stuck, where my phone might have stopped working, where nobody on the main road would have heard me. And the only reason I didn't find out what came next was because I said no at the right time. I never reported it. What would I even say? That a woman asked for help and I got a bad feeling? But for weeks after, every time I stopped at a red light late at night, I checked my mirrors like someone might walk up from nowhere. And every time I saw a stranded car on the shoulder in winter, I kept driving. Not because I didn't care, because I knew exactly how easy it is to be pulled into something you can't explain until it's too late. The worst part wasn't that night itself. It was how normal everything looked afterward. The next morning, I drove past that same street in daylight. Snowbanks had been pushed aside. Kids' toys were half buried in yards. A mail truck idled near the corner like nothing unusual had ever happened there. No sign of the stalled car, no sign of people near the trees, just a quiet neighborhood pretending to be ordinary. That's how those moments stick with you. There's no aftermath, no headline, no proof that lets your brain file it away as danger avoided. Just the feeling that you were inches away from stepping into something with no clean ending. I didn't talk about it with friends. When you try to explain something like that out loud, it immediately sounds dramatic, like you're projecting fear onto coincidence. So I kept it to myself. I kept delivering. A few weeks passed. Winter settled in deeper, the kind of cold where the snow squeaks under your boots and your phone battery drops 10% just sitting in your pocket. One night, near the end of my shift, I stopped at a red light on a main road that cut through town. It was close to 2 a.m. No traffic, no wind, just falling snow and the hum of my engine. I was staring straight ahead when something moved at the edge of my headlights. A figure stepped off the curb. I flinched so hard my foot came off the brake. It was a woman, different from the first one. Older, 30s maybe, dark coat, hair pulled back tight. She walked straight up to my passenger window and knocked, firm and deliberate, like she expected me to roll it down. I didn't. I just stared at her through the glass. She leaned closer, cupped her hands around her face, and mouthed something I couldn't hear. My heart was already racing. The light was still red. There were still no other cars. She knocked again, harder this time. I shook my head slowly, signaling no. Her face changed. Not angry, not scared, just blank, like she'd reached the end of a script and didn't know what to do next. The light turned green. I drove. I checked my mirrors as I went through the intersection, half expecting to see her chasing the car or another figure stepping out from behind something. There was nothing, just empty road and falling snow. That was the moment I realized something had shifted in me. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. Because once you've seen how easily a situation can flip, how quickly sympathy turns into leverage, you don't look at people the same way in isolated places. You start noticing the pauses, the rehearsed answers, the way someone checks their surroundings before asking for help. I finished my shift early that night, parked at home, sat in my car for a long time before going inside. I eventually stopped delivering after midnight altogether, told myself it was about sleep, about productivity, about getting serious near graduation. But really, it was about winter nights and the things that move through them when most people are home, warm and assuming nothing bad could possibly happen. Because the truth is, nothing did happen, and that's what makes it worse. I never found out who those people were, what they wanted, or what would have happened if I'd driven another block, another turn, another minute deeper into that neighborhood. All I know is that winter makes it easier for people to disappear into shadows, and sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that stop right before you see the ending. Story 2: The Fire That Wasn't Meant to Burn. It was early March, that strange in-between stretch where winter hasn't fully let go yet. The snow along the roads had turned gray and hard, packed down into uneven ridges by plows, but the ground underneath was still frozen solid in the mornings. I remember thinking it finally felt safe to start doing things outside again. Not comfortable, just possible. I drove out to a spot I hadn't visited since the previous fall. It wasn't marked on any maps, just a dirt pull-off along a narrow county road that led into state land. I'd found it by accident months earlier while exploring, and what I liked most was how empty it always was. No signage, no cell service, no footprints unless you made them yourself. I parked and hiked in for about 45 minutes, following a faint trail that dipped down into the woods and opened up into a small clearing. It wasn't much, just a circular patch of dirt with a natural overlook that dropped away into trees. I'd camped there before without issue.
I set my pack down as the sun started sinking lower, the light stretching long and pale through the branches. I liked arriving late, less time to overthink, eat, sleep, leave in the morning. I went to gather sticks for a small fire and then walked over to the overlook to watch the sky change. That's when I saw it. A fire. It was down the slope below me, tucked among the trees. At first, I thought it was just another camper who'd arrived earlier in the day, but as I watched, something didn't sit right. There was no tent, no movement, just a fire burning steadily, unattended. I stayed still, watching. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 30. No one came. The sun dipped fully behind the trees, and the fire below actually grew brighter, stronger, as if someone had fed it heavy logs meant to burn long and hot. That's when concern crept in. An unattended fire this close to dry brush wasn't just strange, it was dangerous. I told myself I'd just go check it out, make sure no one was hurt, put it out if I had to. It was only a couple minutes' walk downhill, but by the time I reached it, the woods felt different, quieter, the kind of quiet that makes every footstep sound louder than it should. The fire was large, too large. There were full logs stacked beneath it that hadn't even caught yet, like someone intentionally built it to keep burning after they left. I grabbed wet soil and started tossing it on the flames, working fast. It took several minutes to get it under control, my heart pounding the whole time as the fire hissed and spat back at me. When it finally died down, the silence hit all at once. No crackle, no wind, just darkness and my own breathing. I turned my flashlight on and headed uphill. Halfway back, I decided I wasn't staying the night. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, not panicked wrong, calculated wrong. I started packing immediately when I got back to my campsite. That's when I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. I looked up and saw the outline of someone standing at the edge of the clearing, about 50 yards away. They weren't approaching, they weren't leaving, just watching. I called out, asking if they'd built the fire. No response. I asked again, louder. Nothing. They didn't move. I finished packing without taking my eyes off them, slung my bag over my shoulders and started walking back toward the trail. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I didn't hear footsteps following me either, but I felt watched the entire way out. I reported it to the ranger station the next day. They took notes, asked polite questions, said they'd keep an eye on it. I never went back. And sometimes, when I think about that fire, I wonder if it was meant to burn the woods, or if it was meant to draw someone in.
Story 3. The Shadow at the Bottom of the Stairs. This happened a few years ago, right in the heart of winter. I was working from home at the time, doing customer service for a company that operated mostly on the West Coast. Because of that, my shifts ran late. That night, I was scheduled from 4 in the afternoon until midnight. By the time I logged in, it was already dark outside. Snow had been falling on and off all day, coating the street in that dull, quiet white that seems to swallow sound. Once the sun went down, the neighborhood felt completely still. I lived alone in a small 2-story house, nothing fancy, just a living room and kitchen downstairs, bedrooms and a small office upstairs. I'd worked there plenty of times before, without incident. The first half of my shift was normal. Calls came in, tickets got resolved, time passed. I took my dinner break around 7, heated something quick, then went back upstairs and closed the office door. Around 10, things slowed down. No calls, no new tickets, just me, my headphones, and the glow of the monitor. That's when I heard it, a sound behind me. It wasn't loud, just wrong, like something shifting where it shouldn't. I took my headphones off and listened. Nothing. I walked to the office door and opened it, standing still in the hallway. The house was completely quiet. No footsteps, no voices, no movement. I told myself it was the heat kicking on. Old houses make noise, floors settle, pipes shift. I left the office door open and went back to my desk. For the next couple of hours, nothing else happened. I almost forgot about it. At around 11:30, with my shift nearly over, I heard something again. This time it was softer, but it sent a jolt of fear straight through me. It wasn't a bang or a creak. It sounded like movement. I stood up slowly and stepped into the hallway. The door at the end of the hall, the one leading to the stairs, was open. I knew with absolute certainty that I had closed it earlier. My heart started racing. I stared down the hallway, frozen, when I noticed something else, a shadow. It moved along the wall near the staircase, stretching and shifting as if someone was standing just out of view at the bottom of the steps. I backed into my office without making a sound and locked the door. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and called the police. I sat there, staring at the crack beneath the door, expecting to see light shift, or feet appear, or the handle start to move. Nothing happened. No footsteps, no sounds, just silence. When the police arrived, they searched the entire house. No one was there. There were no signs of forced entry, no open windows, no broken locks. The most terrifying part wasn't that someone might have been in my house. It was realizing that at some point they had walked right past my open office door and chosen not to make themselves known. I moved out 2 months later. Story 4. The Man Who Didn't Leave the Cabin. I was staying alone in a rental cabin near a small ski town I'd visited every winter for years. The resort itself was expensive, so most people stayed scattered through the surrounding woods in these older cabins instead. Mine sat a little off the main road, tucked behind a line of trees, with only one narrow path leading up to the porch. I'd spent the entire day skiing. By the time I got back around 7, the cold had settled deep into my bones. I showered, made something quick to eat, and sat down by the fireplace, letting the crackling fire and quiet hum of the heater lull me into that heavy end-of-day calm. That's when I heard footsteps. They were outside, crunching slowly through the snow. At first, I assumed it was someone heading to another cabin nearby,
but the sound didn't pass by. It stopped right in front of my door. I stood up, listening. No knock, just waiting. Several seconds passed before the knock finally came, soft, delayed, almost hesitant. I walked halfway to the door and stopped. Something about the timing felt off, like whoever was out there was deciding whether or not to announce themselves. I opened the door cautiously. A man stood on the porch, late 30s maybe, dark hair, thick beard. He jumped slightly when he saw me, but it felt forced, like he'd practiced the reaction. He smiled and asked who I was. I told him I was renting the cabin. He said he had booked it for the night. I told him that wasn't possible. I had the place for the entire week. I asked if he had a confirmation or receipt. He didn't. He made an excuse instead. I apologized and started to close the door, but he put his hand on it and stopped me. His smile returned, wider this time. Something in my gut screamed at me. I pushed the door shut and locked it. For about 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard his footsteps retreating into the snow. I sat back down, trying to calm myself. I turned the TV on low and scrolled on my phone, telling myself I was overreacting, but the image of his face wouldn't leave my head. 2 hours later, just before I planned to go to bed, I walked back to the door and looked outside. That's when I saw him. He was standing at the edge of the trees, just far enough that the porch light barely reached him, watching. I called the property owner, who called the police. When officers arrived, they found him nearby. He was carrying a sling bag filled with tools commonly used for break-ins and a hunting knife. He had never booked the cabin. If I hadn't checked before going to bed, I don't know what would have happened that night.
Story 5. The Ride That Almost Went Too Far. I was driving home from work when it happened. It was late, sometime between 1 and 2 in the morning, and the snow had started falling again. Not heavy enough to be a full storm, but steady enough to make the roads slick and quiet. The office parking lot had been nearly empty when I left. By the time I reached the main road, there were no other cars around at all. Just red lights, reflective signs, and the dull glow of street lamps through drifting snow. I pulled up to an intersection and stopped at a red light. That's when something knocked against my truck. I jumped, my heart slamming into my throat, and whipped my head toward the passenger side window. A woman stood there. I had no idea where she'd come from. She was already close, tapping on the glass and looking straight at me. I rolled the window down a few inches, keeping my foot hard on the brake. She apologized immediately, voice rushed, almost rehearsed. She said her car had broken down about a mile back and she'd tried walking home, but the cold was worse than she expected. She asked if I could give her a ride, just another mile down the road. She looked young, late 20s, pale from the cold, shivering. Against my better judgment, I let her in. At first, everything seemed fine. She thanked me repeatedly as we drove. The heater blasted warm air into the cab, fogging the windows. A few minutes later, she told me to turn into a neighborhood I recognized only vaguely. The moment I did, something felt wrong. The houses were small and cramped, old and worn, some barely lit at all. Snow hadn't been plowed properly, and the road narrowed the farther we went. My truck started struggling. I slowed to a stop and told her I couldn't go any further without risking getting stuck. She frowned, then smiled when she noticed me looking. "Just a little farther," she said. I hesitated. She asked again, more insistently this time. I told her no. Her expression hardened instantly. She got out without another word. As I turned the truck around, my headlights swept across the edge of the neighborhood, and that's when I saw them. People, standing near the tree line, waiting. I drove away as fast as I could without losing control on the snow, my heart racing until I reached a main road. I don't know what would have happened if I'd driven farther. I don't want to know.
Story 6. The wet footprints in my house. I was already asleep when the noise woke me. It was the middle of winter, snow falling lightly outside, and the house was quiet in that deep, insulated way it only gets at night. The sound itself wasn't sharp or sudden. It was a long, groaning creak, like wood bending under slow pressure. At first, I thought it was the roof. Old houses complain when the temperature drops fast, and I'd heard similar sounds before. Still, once I was awake, I knew I wasn't going back to sleep unless I checked. I got out of bed and kept the lights off. I didn't want to shock myself fully awake, just a quick look around, then back to bed. I opened the door to the spare room first. It was mostly used for workout equipment, weights, a treadmill, a bench. I looked up at the ceiling. No water damage, no stains, no dripping. I listened. Nothing. I walked over to the window and pulled the curtain back slightly. Snow was still falling, but gently. No wind, no storm. I told myself I imagined the noise. On my way back down the hallway, I decided to check the other room, just to be thorough. The moment I stepped inside, my sock hit something, cold, wet. I froze. I looked down and saw a dark patch soaking into the carpet beneath my foot. I followed it with my eyes, expecting to see a leak above it. There wasn't one. I turned the light on. That's when I saw them. Footprints, wet footprints, clearly defined, spaced evenly like someone walking at a normal pace. They started near the window, crossed the room, continued out into the hallway, and led straight toward my bedroom. My heart started pounding. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and left the house without turning any more lights on. By the time the police arrived and searched the place, no one was there. The snow outside had covered any tracks near the windows. No forced entry, no explanation. What still unsettles me is how unlikely it was that I didn't step in those footprints earlier, which means whoever made them must have been moving through my house while I was awake.
Story 7. Someone left through the blizzard. There was a blizzard that night, bad enough that I'd called off work. The kind where the weather app keeps sending warnings, not because anything new is happening, but because it wants to remind you that going outside would be a mistake. Wind pushed snow sideways, visibility dropped to almost nothing, and by evening the world outside my windows looked like a white wall. I stayed in all day. By night, I'd settled onto the couch with the TV on low, planning to fall asleep there. I remember thinking how quiet the house felt, almost comforting, like the storm had wrapped everything in insulation. I must have fallen asleep earlier than I realized. I woke up suddenly to the sound of someone coughing. Just one cough. It wasn't loud, but it was close enough to snap me fully awake. For a second, I didn't know where I was. Then I noticed how dark the house was. Completely dark. The TV was off. No lights anywhere. I sat up, listening. Nothing. No coughing again. No movement. I told myself it had been a dream, one of those half-awake moments where your brain invents sound. Still, something felt off. I stood up and walked to the front door, peering through the window. Outside was nothing but blowing snow, white, shifting, endless. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Confused, I turned back toward the hallway. That's when I saw movement. Not clear, just a shape slipping out of view at the far end of the hall. My heart slammed into my chest. I flicked on the light. The hallway was empty. I stood there, frozen, debating what to do. The storm was raging outside. Running out into it would be dangerous, but staying inside suddenly felt worse. I took a few careful steps down the hallway. Before I reached the end, there were several loud thumps, quick, heavy, and then a rush of wind. The window in the back room flew open. Snow blasted inside. Someone had just climbed out. For a moment, my body refused to move. Then I rushed forward, slammed the window shut, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my phone the first time I tried to call the police. By the time officers arrived, the blizzard had erased everything. Any footprints, any signs of where they'd gone. No one knew who had been inside my house, or how long they'd been there before I woke up.
Story 8. The Kid Who Wouldn't Leave the Trees. I'm a 29-year-old woman, and I live in a quiet suburb outside Flagstaff, Arizona, right where the neighborhoods give way to miles and miles of forest. It's one of those places where the houses thin out suddenly, and behind the last row of backyards, the trees just keep going. Trails weave through them, unofficial ones mostly, worn down by dog walkers and people like me who enjoy late-night walks when everything's calm. I usually don't go out that late, but this night I couldn't sleep. It wasn't especially cold, just crisp enough that my breath fogged in front of me. Around 8:30 p.m., I put on my jacket, strapped on my headlamp, and headed down the trail behind my house.
I liked how empty it felt at night. No voices, no bikes, just quiet. I'd been walking for maybe 15 minutes when I noticed something ahead. At first, I thought it was a reflection, my headlamp bouncing off a branch or a sign. Then it moved. I stopped walking. There was someone standing just off the trail, deeper in the trees. They were small, short, definitely not an adult, a kid. My first thought was that they'd gotten lost, maybe wandered too far from their yard. It wouldn't have been the first time someone underestimated how far these woods went. "Hey," I called out softly, "are you okay?" The kid didn't respond. They didn't run either. They just stood there, watching me. I took a step closer, angling my light toward them. I still couldn't see their face clearly, but they looked young, 8 or 9, maybe 10 at most. "You shouldn't be out here alone," I said. "The trail's right here. I can walk you back." The kid took a step backward, not fast, not panicked, just enough to keep the same distance between us. I hesitated. That should have been my sign to stop. Instead, I followed. I took a few steps off the trail, carefully watching my footing, continuing to talk so they'd know I wasn't a threat. Each time I moved closer, they moved back again, always staying just far enough ahead that I could still see them. It didn't feel like they were scared. It felt like they were guiding me. After a couple of minutes, the trees around us thickened. My headlamp beam struggled to cut through the branches, and I realized I no longer had a clear view of the trail. That's when the kids stepped behind something and disappeared. I hurried forward, expecting to see them ducking behind a tree. Instead, I saw a structure, a small shed, half-rotted, barely standing. The wood was gray and splintered, the roof sagging inward. It looked ancient, like it had been abandoned for decades. What was a shed doing out here? I stepped closer, heart pounding. Then I heard footsteps, heavy ones, not a kid, an adult. They were coming from somewhere behind the shed, slow and deliberate. My stomach dropped. Every instinct in my body screamed that this wasn't an accident, that the kid, if there even was a kid, had been bait. I shut off my headlamp and ran. Branches slapped against my arms as I sprinted back the way I came, stumbling, barely staying upright. I didn't turn around. I didn't listen for pursuit. I just ran until I burst out onto the trail, then all the way home. I locked my doors and called the police. An officer came out and walked the trail with me, flashlight sweeping through the trees. We found the shed again, but no kid, no footsteps, nothing else. Weeks later, the city tore down the shed. It wasn't supposed to be there, illegal structure on public land. They never released full details, but I heard through neighbors that they found evidence linking it to an attempted kidnapping.
I still don't know who or what I followed into those woods, but I don't walk the trails at night anymore.
Story 9. The Man Who Waited for His Ride. I was 31 at the time, working late shifts at a gas station just outside Bismarck, North Dakota. It was early January, that stretch after the holidays when everything feels slower and colder than usual. That night, the temperature had dropped into the single digits. The wind made it worse, cutting straight through your clothes. Snow wasn't coming down hard, but it never really stopped either, just enough to coat the roads and deaden sound. I was scheduled until 3 a.m. Only a handful of customers had come through all night. Most people weren't stupid enough to be out driving unless they absolutely had to be. Around midnight, the front door chimed. I looked up from the register and jumped. I hadn't heard a car pull in. The man who walked inside didn't go toward the shelves. He didn't come up to the counter. He just stood near the door, hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, staring out through the glass at the empty lot. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "How's it going tonight?" He turned his head slowly toward me and smiled. It looked forced, tight. "Fine," he said, "just waiting on a ride." I glanced outside again. No cars, no headlights on the road. "Well, you're welcome to stay inside," I told him. "It's brutal out there." He nodded, turned back toward the window, and didn't say anything else. I went back to restocking the cooler, keeping him in my peripheral vision. Every few minutes I glanced over. He hadn't moved, still standing there, still watching the snow. 15 minutes passed, then 30, an hour. He never sat down, never checked his phone, never spoke. I walked back behind the counter and leaned against it, trying to figure out what felt so off. Plenty of people waited inside during bad weather, but something about the way he stood there, so still, so patient, made my skin crawl. "Do you want to use the phone, in case you need to check on your ride?" He shook his head. "They'll be here." Another half hour dragged by. When I looked up again, he was staring directly at me, not blinking. His eyes looked dull, almost glassy, and the smile was gone. I opened my mouth to ask if everything was okay, when suddenly headlights swept across the front windows. A car pulled into the lot and stopped right in front of the doors. Relief washed over me. Finally. The man straightened, adjusted his coat, and walked outside. I watched through the glass as he approached the car. The driver rolled the window down. They talked for a moment, too quietly for me to hear, but something about their body language made my stomach tighten. The driver kept glancing toward the store, toward me. They weren't acting like friends. They were coordinating. I didn't think, I just reacted. I rushed to the door and locked it. The click echoed louder than I expected. The man snapped his head toward me, eyes wide with sudden anger. He yanked on the handle, locked. The driver got out of the car and ran up beside him, pulling at the door too. Both of them were shouting now, muffled by the glass. I backed away, shaking, grabbed my phone and called the police. The moment they saw me speaking into the phone, they stopped. The driver sprinted back to the car. The man hesitated for half a second, long enough to glare at me, then followed. They sped out of the lot, tires throwing slush everywhere. Police arrived less than 10 minutes later, but the road cameras never picked them up clearly enough to identify either of them. I finished my shift with an officer sitting inside the store. I still don't know what they were planning, but I know one thing. That man hadn't been waiting for a ride. He'd been waiting for me to unlock the door.